Imagine coming home to find the neighborhood HOA Karen parked her Lexus in your garage without asking. But what she didn't know, he had a lock system that trapped her car inside, and he wasn't about to let it out. When? The HOA, the cops, and even the whole neighborhood got involved. The outcome left everyone speechless. Wait until you see how this black homeowner turned the tables on Karen. Stick around, you won't believe the ending. Jonathan Miller had lived in his quiet suburban home for 5 years, valuing the peace and privacy of his property. His garage was his sanctuary, neatly organized with tools, a classic motorcycle, and his prized black SUV. He rarely had problems with neighbors, except for one, the infamous Karen of the HOA, Linda Pearson. Linda always found ways to meddle in other people's business. Whether it was criticizing lawn heights, dictating what color curtains should be allowed, or harassing Jonathan about his guests, she seemed to thrive on making life difficult. Jonathan usually ignored her antics, but one Friday afternoon, something happened that went beyond annoyance. When Jonathan returned from work, he pressed his garage opener. To his shock, a silver Lexus was sitting inside his garage, parked right where his SUV should have been. He froze, blinking twice, wondering if he had walked into the wrong house. But no, this was definitely his garage. Unbelievable, he muttered, stepping closer. The Lexus had an HOA parking permit on the windshield, the very one Linda proudly displayed at every meeting. His suspicion turned into certainty. Karen had parked her car inside his garage without permission. Jonathan's jaw tightened. He'd dealt with her petty behavior before, but this crossed a line. He glanced at the security camera mounted in the corner. Everything had been recorded. With a smirk, he pressed a button on his keychain, engaging the heavy-duty lock system he'd installed last year. The garage door sealed shut with a metallic thud. Linda's car was now trapped. Jonathan leaned against the wall, arms crossed, a slow grin spreading across his face. "Well, Karen," he muttered, "let's see how you like playing by my rules for once." The game had just begun. The next morning, Linda Pearson strutted across the neighborhood with her usual air of superiority. Her designer sunglasses glinted in the sun as she prepared for the HOA's monthly brunch. She planned to arrive in style as always, driving her prized Lexus. But when she reached her driveway, she froze. Her car wasn't there. Her expression soured. "What on earth?" she muttered, fumbling with her keys. She retraced her steps in her mind. She had parked somewhere, then it clicked. She had left it inside Jonathan Miller's garage yesterday because her driveway had been repaved. Linda marched straight over to Jonathan's property, heels clicking against the pavement. She didn't bother knocking. Instead, she tried the garage keypad on the side wall, punching random numbers. Nothing. The door stayed shut, silent and unmoving. "Ugh, ridiculous," she huffed. She marched up to Jonathan's front door and rang the bell repeatedly. Inside, Jonathan sipped his coffee, watching her through the peephole with amusement. He wasn't in any rush to answer. Instead, he picked up his phone, pulled up the security footage, and replayed the moment she had parked her Lexus in his garage without permission. Finally, Jonathan opened the door, calm and collected. "Good morning, Linda. Something wrong?" Linda's face flushed red. "Yes, something's wrong. You locked my car inside your garage. Open it immediately." Jonathan raised an eyebrow. "Correction, it's my garage. You trespassed. Your car just happens to be trapped there." Her jaw dropped. "You can't do that. I'm on the HOA board." Jonathan smirked. "Exactly, which means you should know better than to break property laws." For the first time, Linda was speechless. Jonathan shut the door, leaving her fuming on his porch. This was far from over. By mid-afternoon, Linda had gathered reinforcements. 3 other HOA board members stood in Jonathan's driveway, arms crossed, their expressions a mix of outrage and self-importance. They had clearly been fed Linda's version of the story. Jonathan watched from the living room window, shaking his head. "Here we go," he muttered. The doorbell rang. When he opened it, Linda shoved a manicured finger toward his chest. "Jonathan Miller, you are in violation of HOA cooperation standards. You must release my vehicle at once." Jonathan chuckled. "Violation? That's rich. You broke into my garage without permission. I should be calling the police right now." One of the board members, Mr. Reynolds, cleared his throat. "Jonathan, we can resolve this peacefully. Just open the garage and let Linda retrieve her car." Jonathan stepped outside, holding up his phone. "Peacefully? I have video proof of her trespassing. She keyed in no code, no permission. She just drove right in. That's breaking and entering. Linda's face turned crimson. Don't you dare use that word. I was only parking temporarily. My driveway was under repair. It's called being a good neighbor. Jonathan smirked. A good neighbor or an entitled one? The tension in the air thickened. Neighbors began to peek out from their windows, watching the commotion unfold. A few even pulled out their phones to record the scene. Jonathan, Mr. Reynolds tried again. If you don't release the car, the HOA will fine you. Jonathan laughed. Fine me? For what? Protecting my own property? Go ahead, issue your little fine. The police and my lawyer will love to hear about it. Linda's confidence cracked for the first time. She hadn't expected Jonathan to fight back this strongly. The crowd outside grew larger. The showdown was just beginning. Linda's shrill voice carried across the street as she pulled out her phone. If you won't open the garage, Jonathan, I'll call the police, she threatened, her tone dripping with arrogance. Jonathan leaned against his doorway, arms folded. Go ahead. Please do. That answer caught her off guard, but she dialed anyway, loudly complaining to the dispatcher that her neighbor had illegally trapped her car. Within 20 minutes, 2 police cruisers pulled up, lights flashing. Neighbors swarmed to their lawns, eager for the drama. Officer Daniels and Officer Harper stepped out, adjusting their belts. What seems to be the issue here? Daniels asked. Before Jonathan could speak, Linda launched into her story. This man locked my Lexus in his garage. He's holding it hostage. That's theft. Jonathan calmly handed the officers his phone. Before you believe her, watch this. On the screen, the footage showed Linda brazenly pulling into his garage, stepping out without permission, and walking away as if she owned the place. The timestamp was clear. Officer Harper's brows rose. Ma'am, did you have permission to use his garage? Linda's face twisted. Well, my driveway was being repaved. It was temporary. Jonathan's voice was cool. Doesn't change the fact that it's trespassing, and since she left her vehicle on my property, it's technically in my custody until the matter is resolved. Officer Daniels sighed. Ma'am, he's right. You had no legal right to park there. If he wanted, he could press charges. The color drained from Linda's face. She had expected the officers to side with her instantly. Instead, the neighborhood murmured in agreement with Jonathan. For once, Karen's power was slipping. Jonathan smiled slightly. Officers, thank you. I'll hold on to the car until the HOA decides how to handle this trespass. Linda's jaw dropped. You can't. But deep down she knew he could. After the police left, Linda was boiling with rage. She stormed back to her house, slamming the door so hard that her windows rattled. She had been humiliated in front of the entire neighborhood. Even worse, Jonathan now had the upper hand, and she hated losing. Pacing her living room, Linda dialed her best friend on the HOA board, Cynthia. This is harassment. He's trapping my car. We need to fine him, maybe even sue him. Cynthia hesitated. But Linda, the police already said he's in the right. If this goes to court, he has the footage. You really did trespass. Linda gritted her teeth. So what? I'm not letting some smug man embarrass me. I'll find another way. The next morning, Jonathan found a bright orange HOA notice taped to his door. It claimed he was creating a nuisance and demanded that he release Linda's vehicle immediately or face daily fines. Jonathan chuckled as he read it. He knew it was a desperate bluff. Instead of reacting, Jonathan printed copies of the security footage and slipped them under the doors of several neighbors. By noon, half the street was buzzing about how Linda had trespassed and gotten caught. Some even posted about it in the neighborhood's private Facebook group, where comments piled up, mostly mocking Linda. Later that evening, Linda marched to Jonathan's house again, her face twisted with forced confidence. This has gone far enough. Open the garage, or the HOA will take serious action. Jonathan leaned casually against the doorframe. Funny thing, Linda, the HOA doesn't override the law, and the law says you're the one in trouble. For once, Karen didn't have a snappy comeback. Her desperation was starting to show. By the weekend, the entire neighborhood was buzzing. Jonathan's video had spread beyond the Facebook group. Neighbors were sharing it with friends, some even joking about GarageGate. For once, the infamous OA Karen wasn't feared, she was ridiculed. Jonathan sat on his porch, sipping iced tea, as a few neighbors strolled over. Mr. Lopez, who lived across the street, chuckled. Jonathan, you're a legend. About time someone stood up to her. Mrs. Green, who usually stayed out of neighborhood drama, leaned in and whispered, "Don't let her bully you. She's been harassing everyone for years. You're just the first who actually fought back." Jonathan smiled but kept his guard up. He knew Linda wasn't finished. She thrived on control, and losing face in front of the entire street was something she'd never forgive. Sure enough, later that afternoon, Linda stormed into the cul-de-sac, dragging along a clipboard. She began knocking on doors, demanding signatures for a petition to force Jonathan to open the garage. But this time, the response wasn't what she expected. "I'm not signing that, Linda," Mr. Lopez told her firmly. "You're the one who trespassed," Mrs. Green added, slamming her door. Even Cynthia, her so-called ally on the HOA board, refused. "Linda, you went too far. People are tired of your nonsense." Each rejection chipped away at Linda's confidence. She stood in the street, fuming as she realized the tide was turning against her. For the first time, she wasn't the neighborhood's authority, she was its laughingstock. Back inside his home, Jonathan checked the garage camera feed. Linda's Lexus sat quietly in the corner, untouched. He grinned to himself. The car wasn't just locked away, it was now the symbol of her downfall. And Jonathan wasn't planning on letting it go anytime soon. Jonathan knew Linda wouldn't give up easily. She thrived on drama, and her pride was bigger than her Lexus. That evening, he received a thick envelope in his mailbox marked urgent. Inside was an official-looking letter, stamped with the HOA's logo. The notice claimed Jonathan was illegally detaining private property and threatened daily fines, plus legal action, if he didn't release the vehicle immediately. Jonathan chuckled as he read it. "Nice try, Linda," he muttered. He pulled out his phone and dialed his attorney, Mark Evans, a sharp and relentless lawyer he had used once before in a property dispute. "Jonathan, this is open and shut," Mark said after reviewing the security footage. "She trespassed. The car is evidence. If they keep harassing you with fake fines, we can file a counterclaim for harassment and abuse of authority." That gave Jonathan an idea. He made several copies of both the HOA notice and his lawyer's letter of response, which stated in bold letters, "Any further attempt to intimidate Mr. Miller will result in legal action against the HOA and its board members personally." The next day, he slid those copies under his neighbors' doors. By lunchtime, everyone knew the truth. The HOA had overstepped, and Jonathan wasn't backing down. Linda, on the other hand, was unraveling. She sat at the HOA clubhouse, ranting to anyone who would listen. "He's holding my car hostage. This is abuse. Do you want a dangerous man like him in our neighborhood?" But her words no longer carried weight. Even her allies were slipping away, wary of getting dragged into her mess. Jonathan, meanwhile, sat comfortably at home, sipping coffee and checking the garage camera feed. The Lexus gleamed under the light, silent proof of Linda's arrogance. And Jonathan knew, the longer it stayed there, the worse it would get for her. By now, Linda couldn't step outside without feeling the weight of her neighbor's stares. Conversations hushed when she walked by. Phones were raised, recording her every move, waiting for the next dramatic outburst. Jonathan's video had even leaked beyond the neighborhood Facebook group. Someone had uploaded it to TikTok with the caption, "HOA Karen parks in black man's garage. Regrets it." Within 2 days it had thousands of views, and comments poured in mocking her arrogance. Linda nearly dropped her phone when she saw it. "This is slander!" she screamed, pacing her living room. But deep down, she knew the footage didn't lie. That evening she decided to try another approach. Dressing in her finest outfit, she knocked on Jonathan's door with a forced smile. "Jonathan, dear, let's be reasonable. Why don't you open the garage and we'll just forget this whole thing happened?" Jonathan raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Forget it happened? Linda, you humiliated yourself. The footage is already public. What's to forget?" Her smile cracked. "You don't understand. I need that car for work, for appointments. People are laughing at me." Jonathan's voice was calm but firm. "Maybe now you know how it feels to be bullied and embarrassed. You've been doing it to this neighborhood for years. Consider this a lesson." Behind her, 2 teenagers from the block filmed the exchange, snickering quietly. Linda spun around, shrieking, "Stop recording me!" before stomping off. Later that night, Jonathan checked the garage feed again. The Lexus sat untouched, its polished surface reflecting the camera's light. It was no longer just a trapped car. It had become the neighborhood's biggest joke, and Jonathan intended to keep it that way, at least until Linda truly learned her lesson. The HOA emergency meeting was supposed to be Linda's chance to rally support and regain control. She marched into the clubhouse, shoulders stiff, clipboard in hand. But the room didn't buzz with loyalty. It buzzed with murmurs, smirks, and thinly veiled laughter. Jonathan, invited by a few sympathetic neighbors, took a seat near the back. He didn't need to say a word. His presence alone made Linda squirm. "Order! Let's begin," Linda said, banging the gavel with unnecessary force. "We are here to discuss Mr. Miller's unlawful detainment of my vehicle and the disruption he's caused." A hand shot up. It was Mr. Lopez. "Correction, you mean you're trespassing, Linda." The whole neighborhood saw the footage. Murmurs of agreement echoed. Mrs. Green added sharply, "And let's not forget the fake fines you tried to slap on Jonathan. That's abuse of your AO power." Linda's face turned crimson. "This board is supposed to support me," she barked. But Cynthia, her closest ally, finally spoke up. "Linda, we're tired. You bullied everyone here. Jonathan didn't trap your car. You trapped yourself by thinking you could break the rules without consequences." The room erupted in applause. Linda's jaw dropped as she realized the board was slipping out of her control. For years, she had manipulated votes, threatened fines, and lorded over the neighborhood like a queen. But now, the crown was gone. Jonathan stood slowly, his voice steady. "I'm not here for revenge. I just want my property respected. If this board continues to harass me, my lawyer will handle it. But if you're willing to make changes, I'll gladly work with a fair HOA." The neighbors clapped again, louder this time. Linda, trembling with rage, slammed the gavel and stormed out. For the first time, the HOA wasn't hers to command. After Linda stormed out of the clubhouse, the room seemed lighter, freer, like a weight had been lifted. For years, neighbors had whispered about her controlling nature, but nobody had dared confront her. Jonathan's stand changed everything. Mr. Reynolds, the HOA treasurer, cleared his throat. "Folks, I think it's time we reconsider leadership. Our community deserves someone fair, not someone who abuses authority." The suggestion hung in the air before Mrs. Green boldly said, "I nominate Jonathan Miller." Jonathan almost laughed. "Me? I'm not interested in playing politics." But the crowd wasn't joking. One after another, neighbors nodded and voiced agreement. "At least you'd be honest. You've already shown you won't let anyone push you around." Jonathan held up his hands. "I'm flattered, but I don't want control. I just want peace. Maybe someone else who actually cares about the community should step up." The discussion carried on without Linda, and for the first time, the HOA felt like a group of neighbors instead of a dictatorship. Cynthia, guilt written all over her face, finally spoke. "I'll volunteer to chair temporarily until we can hold a fair election. But Linda has to be removed officially." A vote was called. The tally was nearly unanimous. Linda Pearson was stripped of her HOA authority. Meanwhile, across the street, Linda sat in her darkened living room, glaring at the clubhouse lights. Through her blinds, she watched people leaving with smiles, chatting as if a celebration had taken place. Her fists clenched. They turned on me. All of them. Back at Jonathan's house, he poured himself another glass of iced tea and opened the garage app. The Lexus was still sitting there like a trophy. The power had shifted, and Linda knew it. The next morning, Jonathan stepped outside to grab his newspaper and nearly tripped over a handwritten note shoved under his doormat. "You think you've won, but this isn't over. I'll get my car back, one way or another." Jonathan shook his head with a laugh. "She never learns." That night, just past midnight, his phone buzzed with an alert from the garage camera. Jonathan opened the feed and saw a shadowy figure creeping near the side entrance. A flashlight beam flickered across the garage door keypad. Of course, it was Linda. She fumbled with the buttons, muttering curses under her breath. After several failed attempts, she pulled something from her purse, a small crowbar. She was actually trying to break into his garage. Jonathan hit record on the app and quietly dialed the police. "Yes, this is Jonathan Miller, the same neighbor from last week. She's trying to break into my garage right now. I have it on camera." Within minutes, flashing lights filled the street. Linda was caught red-handed, standing with the crowbar raised when Officer Daniels approached. "Mum, drop it," he ordered firmly. Linda froze, then sputtered. "This is my car. He stole it from me. I'm just taking back what's mine." Jonathan stepped onto his porch, arms folded. Correction, you're trespassing again, and now you're attempting a break-in. That's a felony. The officers exchanged a glance. Linda was quickly handcuffed, her protests echoing through the neighborhood as doors opened and sleepy neighbors stepped outside to watch. Phones recorded, murmurs spread. The once feared HOA queen was now being escorted into the back of a squad car. Jonathan simply waved as they drove her away. Good night, Linda. The Lexus was still safe, and so was Jonathan's victory. The following week, the neighborhood felt like a different place. With Linda officially stripped of her HOA authority and facing pending charges for attempted break-in, the air was lighter, calmer. For once, neighbors weren't afraid to speak freely. Jonathan became something of a local hero. People stopped by to thank him for standing up to her, for showing that bullies lose power when someone pushes back. Children even joked about the legendary locked Lexus, turning Linda's arrogance into a neighborhood punchline. At the next HOA meeting, Cynthia officially took over as interim chair until elections could be held. From this point forward, she said, the HOA will work with homeowners, not against them. No more intimidation, no more abuse. The room erupted in applause. Meanwhile, Jonathan finally made his decision. With the legal process underway, he contacted Linda through his lawyer. Her Lexus could be returned, but only after she signed a formal agreement to never step foot on his property again. Cornered, humiliated, and desperate, she signed without hesitation. The day the tow truck arrived to remove the Lexus from Jonathan's garage, neighbors gathered to watch. Some cheered, others filmed. Linda refused to show her face, sending a relative to handle the retrieval. Her reign was over. Jonathan stood with a quiet smile. He hadn't wanted a war with his neighbor, but when pushed, he had fought back, and won. More importantly, he had helped the whole neighborhood see that even the loudest bully could be silenced. As the garage door closed for the final time on the matter, Jonathan whispered to himself, "Peace, at last," and for the first time in years, the neighborhood truly felt like home again.